Testing 1 2.
Loud.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. This is DJ Rowe. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, everybody. Yeah, this is what I wanted. I can hear us. That's what I want. Say something.
It's Global History Night.
Yes, it is.
What's everybody doing? We are thrilled. We are thrilled to be back. And we're thrilled to be on YouTube.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Yes. Which is very cool. Our new thing. But I am still on Facebook. Like I have been for, it's been over 2 years.
Yes, it's been a few, man.
Yes, it has been.
It's been a while, man.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. I mean, definitely when I go back and look at some of the ones in the beginning, it's like, whoa, we're stopping like every... I've gotten to be a much better talker because of this show.
You are good. But everybody's been through it. Even the Duck Soup Age was the same way.
Yeah.
You would think, though, you wouldn't expect that from Age, but I remember when Age first started, he was the same way.
Well, not quite the same, because Age is more naturally volatile than I am.
Yeah, you're actually pretty good. It was literally almost kind of the same way. He would get up there, he didn't know what to say.
Really?
It was the same. It was pretty much
I'm gonna have to go back.
Like I said, he has more of a hip-hop vibe to him.
Yeah.
But it still was like, he didn't know what to say.
I'm going to go back there and I want to hear what Age sounded like before.
Yeah, you got to look at some of the old ones.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can go back that far, but you'd have to go back to radiofortheworld.com and go way back, like 4 years back.
Well, I'm getting a lot more practice talking these days than I had before. I did 2 interviews this week for my event.
Nice.
Yeah, my Ralph Bunche event. One of them was written and one of them was a phone interview. So, and the phone interview was with somebody that's also really, really interested in Black history, and so that was a really good conversation. Right. The other journalist is good. I mean, he's interested, but it wasn't like passionate. He just sent me a couple questions. And Danette also interviewed Pastor Quick, so it will be interesting to hear from him. It's funny though, because with my shows, it's a balance because I don't like to talk about it too much. I want people to see the film with open-minded without looking for things I may have said. But when you're trying to get publicity, you kind of do need to talk a little bit more. So, how's your week been? Busy?
It's been busy, very busy.
Seriously, yeah.
Very busy.
Yeah, but I had notes for the 14th or something, and so I was looking at them, trying to decide if I should just scrap them or not. But you know, some stuff is still the same. We haven't. Well, rest in peace, Mugabe.
Yeah.
Robert Mugabe. I can't believe you sent me that message, man. You've become a total global nut.
Yes, thanks to Anna, everybody.
Yes.
I'm sending her messages. I think, did you know about it before me still?
No.
What?
Yes.
No, dude.
That was something. That was really, I mean, I was online. I mean, I saw it like a minute later, but no, so good job.
I'm juiced now. I feel like, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Very satisfying, I'm sure. So there was a smallish funeral back in Zimbabwe. He'd been in Singapore. This was pretty sad. It was at a stadium and it was half full.
Mm-hmm.
So really subdued other leaders there. But meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, I think people were busy with other problems. There's been a strike by medical workers for a while because they haven't been paid. And so a doctor that was a union leader was kidnapped, and his name was, I don't have, wait a minute. My God. Okay. How could I I'm sorry. This is okay. How I don't know how I could do this again, but I have. Well, this is even okay. Here we go. Because I edited my notes for 2 weeks ago, and I was looking at it, and I was like, wait a minute, I know more happened because he was missing for 5 days, and that's what my notes were. But then I edited to put in that he was found, and in very bad shape. His name is Dr. Peter Magombe, the president of the Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association. He was held in an unknown location for 5 days before being discovered on the side of the road, disoriented in England. But riot police have been deployed to keep him from leaving Zimbabwe to seek medical attention. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, so it looks like things are still pretty bad in Zimbabwe. The United Nations opened, and so I'm always interested in that, well, especially ever since I started working on the Dag Hammarskjöld case, which I'm actually going to get to talk about at not the next event, but the one after that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's pretty wild. I've been working on it, and I'm sure people will be. I thought about bringing my laptop today so I could sort of work on it, so that I could be thinking out loud or cheating, getting some work on it while doing the show. But it's about the connections, my path, Bayard Rustin, Ralph Bunche, Dag Hammarskjöld, and I'll just go into this. Dag Hammarskjöld was the second Secretary General of the United Nations, who I researched, and I also researched Bayard Rustin, the civil rights and labor leader. So while I was researching the UN, I found out about Ralph Bunche, who was a diplomat, but he was African American, also involved in civil rights and labor. He was a scholar. He'd been involved in all the same stuff as Bayard Rustin, and they knew each other. And one of the things I've done is tracked their encounters. Not that there's that many, and I think I've talked about that there too, but it was interesting because it was funny to me that I became interested in Dag Hammarskjöld because he was a Swedish aristocrat. He was born in a castle. His father was the prime minister of Sweden. So he spoke several languages and was an outdoorsman and photographer, and just very elegant and refined. And I don't know, I'm not like a total clod, but I just sort of felt like, I'm sure we would have gotten along, but culturally I didn't feel that akin to him. But Ralph Bunche was African American from the West Coast, and he reminded me of people I knew, and his life was exceptional. There is nobody you can compare him with. I mean, the level of power and influence that he had, the effect he had. During one of the interviews, I was talking about this, and he was instrumental to the formation of the United Nations, of putting in, he was the head of the trusteeship commission, and well, that was after, but when the United Nations were being formed, he wrote a clause that would lead to the colonies being free, and this was during the very brief time when he worked for the State Department. So he was able to do that. I mean, very, very brief, but no surprise, the U.S. didn't want to put that in, so he gave it to the Australian delegation, and they put it in. So over 20 countries, more like 30, became independent while Ralph Bunche was at the United Nations, and he had been working on that issue as an academic for 20 years before he began working with the UN, and so less than 20 years. So I'm going to be making those connections. The interests to me are kind of my interests: diplomacy and nonviolence in the 20th century. Doesn't that sound like really serious? So serious that, okay, now this is big. This is big news. I started the Doug Hammarskjöld Facebook page 5 years ago to monitor the investigation into his death, and definitely, I mean, I'm pretty proud of it because that was. It seems like an ages ago social media, but I wanted a focal point for the effort, and at the time, especially, Facebook pages seemed like almost a replica of websites. So if you can't have a website, you can do that. I do have a website now for Justice for Hammarskjöld. It's justiceforhammarskjöld.com. I kind of had to because not everybody's on Facebook, but kind of lame. I am not. It's a WordPress, so I mean, I hired somebody to build it for me, but I'm not that good about updating it.
How much did it? This is way off the subject, but how much was it to get a website made? I'm just curious.
You know what? I don't remember. It was 2 years ago.
And so, like, are you supposed to, like, you were just saying that you haven't updated or something?
I haven't updated it.
What do you usually do? What would you do to update it? Like add pictures and stuff like that?
Yeah, put more material in it, and there's a blog part that I have worked on updating just recently, but I'm fooling around. I mean, it's like anything. I just need to mess with it more because I originally, I mean, like WordPress, anybody can have a WordPress site, and at first the design, I was saying to the designer, like, wait a minute, I have one of those, but you can, that's just a platform that a lot of people use. It still makes, you know, I mean, there's still a difference, but professionals use it too. It's not all just like a, so I've been trying to go on it to promote the Ralph Bunche event. People who know who Doug Hammarskjöld was, mostly, not even entirely, would know who Ralph Bunche was.
Right.
Because they know about the United Nations, but not many. A lot of people that know who Ralph Bunche was, even, I mean, a lot of people vaguely know, as I've said, because he was part of popular culture, don't know who Hammarskjöld was.
Right.
So I was kind of hesitant because I'm always feel weird about booking myself at my own events, but this is my research, and this is putting it together, because this is the event on the 12th, and we have Professor Charles Henry, who's going to be talking about comparisons between Bunche and Barack Obama. So that's going to be really interesting, and because it's new. I mean, he's written about Ralph Bunche, and I've read all the stuff he wrote, but so this will be different, and he's retired, and he's coming to Vallejo.
Nice.
And then our own Vallejo's Pastor Quick is going to be speaking. See, that's what I got. I had, you know, man, I know busy people, but man, trying to, like, pastors are busy. And so he was going to come speak. He's going to speak on the 2nd, and I want to do an event during the day, and I'd set it up, and I was just going to do it myself. I mean, and get somebody else, get another speaker, but I know enough about him to do Q&A for the film. And so Pastor Quick made the time to come because Professor Henry was his professor. So that's going to be really cool. And Pastor Quick is going to talk about the political philosophy of Ralph Bunche. So this is going to be a journey. October 2nd, showing the film, Wednesday, October 2nd, and then Q&A and Pastor Quick speaking, and we'll have copies of Professor Henry's book for sale, and I want to also get copies of the biography by Brian Urquhart. The biography is long. I think it might be a little intimidating to people, but it's really readable. And what I would like to do, and I want to talk with the people at Alibi Bookstore about this, is you could do like a book group, like a reading group with the Bunche biography and assign different people different chapters to read. Because most people don't have the time to read.
Right.
Not many people are going to have the time to read the whole thing.
True.
So we're looking at that, and that's the second. And then on the 12th, I'm going to show the film again, and Professor Henry will do Q&As, and then we have the talk. So they're both going to speak. So fortunately, we're going to have all this time to just do the basics, so then it'll make somewhat more sense to people to they'll have more of a basic knowledge, so they can look at the more deeper themes that pastor and professor are going to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Ralph Bunche the political, he was in the State Department during the Roosevelt administration, but then Truman wanted him in his cabinet, Eisenhower wanted him in his cabinet, Kennedy wanted him in his cabinet, but he worked for the United Nations, and I think that's one reason he just was in a unique position. I mean, there's a photo, I'm doing a presentation of, as an archivist, one of the things I do is try and look at photos and figure out what's happening more than what's obvious.
Right.
Like I have a picture of Ralph Bunche at the NAACP convention. It tells you who a couple of the people are, other people are in the picture, but I identified someone else. So I have Helen Gahagan Douglas, who was a real awesome lady and congresswoman. So I have that in, and I have stuff about his family, and okay, so there's that picture, and there's pictures showing his connection with people. See, one of the big interests is decolonization, and when Doug Hammarskjöld and Ralph Bunche had a true intellectual connection, and they were just both extremely smart and really viewed each other as equals. They were very close, and both very committed to decolonization, just deeply and personal. So I'm showing pictures of them with different leaders, with different revolutionary leaders of new governments. And Doug Hammarskjöld believed that the role of the United Nations was to assist these new governments in getting formed. And one of the excuses that were used by occupying colonialist countries is saying, well, people aren't ready to govern themselves. And Ralph Bunche's attitude was just, nobody's ready to do that. You need to just do it. One of the things he did was try and help run Congo. We've talked about this before, because the Belgians, like 10% of the Congolese, only like 10% of people could read when the Belgians left, and so there was nobody to run the government. This was another discussion I recently had with a relative of mine that sort of blew my mind. My brother said, he said that after a lot of his travels, he kind of believed in benevolent dictatorships.
Like seriously believed in them?
Well, not serious.
Or was he being funny?
He was being partially funny and partially... He was saying he cares less about democracy and about democracy than he used to. It's like, what? And I was like, okay, well, A, that's fucked up, and B, there aren't any benevolent dictatorships. There aren't any dictatorships where people aren't leading really fucked up lives. Except, so, yeah, man, that kind of blows my mind a little bit. So...
Yeah, I can't believe you said that.
I know, me neither. We really, but, you know, I mean, some people have relatives that are Trump voters, and I have a relative that doesn't believe in restoring antiquities and is sort of sympathetic to
Trump.
Well, yeah, some people have relatives that are Trump voters that they need to deal with, and so my disagreements or whatever with my brother are not significant compared to that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, speaking of our boy?
So what's the deal with this whole little impeachment thing?
Oh man.
I don't ever think. I don't know why they keep bringing it up like they're gonna do it.
Well, exactly, because they think they can get him, and I mean, I think that, it's certain. Okay, what they're saying, it's pretty fucking bad, but it's also.
I think they'll never ever really impeach a president. I don't think it'll ever really happen.
Well, impeach just means the trial.
Yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah, I mean.
I mean, when it comes
you
down
mean
to
remove,
the whole thing,
they won't actually
they may do a
remove him from
partial trial,
office.
but I still think overall they don't want to do a trial. They really don't want to do that, and they really wouldn't. I don't think they would convict them.
Well, the Democrats want to because it'll give them a big chance to show off in front of the cameras.
I have a weird theory on impeachment.
Okay, let's hear it.
My theory is they don't want to ever impeach a president because it would make a lot of politicians look bad if it ever happens where they got impeached and were found guilty. That's my opinion.
Well, I don't. But the politicians already look bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the people that
in the way this world works, it's like you could look bad, but if you're never convicted, it's not the same as if you're convicted and look bad.
See,
I know that sounds funny, but that's usually how it works. Let's just say me and you just went somewhere, right? Let's just say you're bad. You're like,
but this is Trump.
Anna is mean. Well, Trump anyway. Anna's mean, the meanest person in the world, right? Anna never got convicted, never got in trouble. Let's just say I'm not the meanest person, but one day I got in trouble.
Let's not.
It's really on my record that I got in trouble. It's not on your record, but everybody knows Anna's.
This is
bad.
I don't like hypotheticals.
I think it's true.
But that's just a hypothetical.
That's how people treat people.
I don't do hypotheticals. Intellectual. Yeah, I don't think they're relevant. We can talk about some of them. It's going to give the candidates. Poor old Cory Booker is still trying to stay in the debate. Some people I know were saying this, like, now the candidates are sending like desperate emails and stuff, and it's annoying. People who don't have much money are really getting squeezed. So, yeah, because he hasn't qualified to be on the debate stage.
Wow. Huh?
He's so not presidential. Cory's dramatic. Man, if Cory were a woman, people would be like...
Hey, Trump became president. If Trump could...
No, but Trump's not... But Cory's like but Cory's emotional. Trump is just bombastic.
You don't really think Trump is kind of emotional a little bit?
Not like Cory Booker. Dude,
I don't know about that one.
Well, come on, not like Cory Booker.
He's kind of I don't know, man. His tweets, and I don't know, dude.
You're comparing Trump and Cory Booker?
I'm saying in emotionalism. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I couldn't say that Cory's so emotional that he couldn't be president, but then Trump is president. I don't know. It's just kind of weird to me.
Well, we need to not fall into that Trump is president, so anybody can be. I mean, it's kind of true,
it feels
but
like.
we need to have standards. But okay, anyway, let's go back to our boy Joe. Okay, our boy Joe, because we both like Joe.
Yeah, we both like Biden. Biden's cool.
Unfortunately, this stuff with his son is bad, and.
Yeah.
I see it more on a personal level first because it's sad. It's with his son Hunter Biden, and there's been talk about Hunter Biden for years. He's kind of indiscreet. He had, oh, remember the Ashley, well, see, they've been pretty good, but people like Joe so much, they kind of let Hunter slide. Remember, his name came up in the Ashley in the, some porn database thing, and he had a messy divorce. His wife left him and said that he was spending all their money on drugs and hookers, and so their checks to the housekeeper were bouncing, and I don't understand that, man. See, I don't care if I was married. I mean, if I was married, nobody would be able to spend to do that. My spouse would not be able to do stuff like that.
It happens.
Well,
I know I hate to say it like that, but it happens.
How can you just let somebody spend your household money on themselves? I don't understand that. But since he was, especially with a job like his, because so there was that, and then he hooked up with his late brother's wife. Beau Biden was like, this is what's sad. Beau Biden was like the golden boy. Everybody thought Beau was gonna run for office someday. I mean, he was just super high achieving. Everybody liked him, and they went through a tragedy. The two boys, right after their father, Joe Biden, was first elected to the Senate, his wife at the time was driving, and they were hit by a car, and his wife and their daughter died, and the little boys were injured. So they had that big trauma, and he went ahead and continued being in the Senate, so was a single parent during part of the time, and then he married Jill when they were kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, so they had that pressure to deal with, and then they had the pressure of being a politician's family. You know, it's like being a preacher's family. People expect you to be a certain way, and I mean, I think it's even worse. The photo ops and stuff are even worse. But it's the same thing. You're trying to, I mean, who knows? And then you have people wanting to get at you, make friends with you because of your relative, and so Hunter clearly had some problems, and then he married. Oh, okay. So he and his wife split up, and then he was dating Beau's wife, his late brother's wife, and so that was kind of sticky and messy, and then he just married somebody that he met like 3 weeks before. So something crazy. So he's obviously kind of volatile. And so what's being said is that, I mean, the issue, and it has been talked about for a while, is whether, because Hunter did contracting type jobs, was whether he got a big contract in Ukraine. And was placed on a board or something, and I even forget exactly. But so, I don't know, back to the point of his wife not knowing what was up with him. I guess if you have a job like that where you have like lots of different contracts and stuff, I can see how you can get away with secreting your money. So, what people are saying now is that Trump asked the government of Ukraine to investigate Hunter Biden and tried to make it contingent. Well, people are saying that he talked about aid there, possibly like cutting off aid or giving more aid. So it was crazy. Rudy Giuliani was on CNN being insane and saying that it didn't happen, but then the transcript was released and it did happen. So basically, see, this is like a classic Trump sort. Now he's saying like, well, he talked to him, but he didn't like make any aid contingent upon it. And but it doesn't matter when the president of the United States asks you for something. That I mean, that's the point they're going to be trying to make. But, I mean, Joe is kind of... Well, Joe's being ridiculous lately. I mean, he's just being really dumb. He's being offensive. He was really disrespectful when he was at the LGBT forum. He was disrespectful to the woman that was talking to him. So he's also just showing signs of, like, the strain and... But I think what's gonna happen to Hunter Biden, I mean, stuff like this just escalates, so I can just see him going on a bender and waking up, just getting in more trouble, doing something like that. Because, I mean, he's gonna have the pressure of having this thing over his head and trying to lie and cover it up, and it's just fucked up, because the Bidens were just always held up as this kind of like perfect family. And I mean, I can relate to him, because I don't like blow my finances on hookers and cocaine, but I'm sort of like the youngest kid, the younger kid that's like not as good as like the superstar kid. And I was going to go on this trip, the civil rights trip remember I was talking about that with my brother, but I canceled it because he was going to go on, he wasn't going to go on like the weekend trip place going to the sites with me, because he's gone there before, but there was going to be a dinner that he was going to go to for this foundation that he's the board of, the Truth and Justice Reconciliation, I don't know, something rather like that. So, but then it turned out he wasn't even going to go to that. So I was like, oh man, I'm going to need to go to some banquet in Mississippi on my own, and it's not going to be fun without my brother. And then I didn't want to go on because I felt like, okay, I did a lot of trips for a long time with groups of people I didn't know, which was fine, but I just don't want to do that anymore. And I just felt like, well, I don't want to go someplace as just my Matt Bergman's sister. And that's what it would have been like. People know my brother was on the board, and so people would want to be nice to me in the hopes of like getting closer to him. So, shit, I don't know. It just seems like he's done worse stuff and it hasn't brought him down. And the thing that the Democrats need to think about is, okay, even if he's impeached and Pence becomes president, is it going to be easier to I think it would be easier to defeat Trump in 2020 than defeat Pence. Mm-hmm. So I kind of think now they should hold off on it.
Okay.
So
I haven't heard much from my boy. What's up with him?
Which one?
Who do you think I'm talking
I don't know who you're talking about.
Oh, really? You're going to act like you don't know who I'm talking about now.
Bird Dog?
Yes! Bird Dog!
He's being a dope, like usual. He said, oh, wait, but actually, well, Biden's doing even worse. Biden went on, he won't take any responsibility or anything. He won't apply any thoughtfulness or culpability to race. And people are, I think people know that, I think people would be more people know that times have changed and things aren't like they were 30 years ago, but he just keeps trying to deny. He keeps talking about when he was like a lifeguard in a black neighborhood, and some sort of story about how he fought some guy or something, and it's like, who gives a fuck, man? You need to try and connect with people now and stop being patronizing, and maybe so anyway, at one of the last debates, he was asked about what he would do for racial equity. And we've talked about this before, the difference between equity and equality. Like, okay, it's the same with like that dumbass wanting to give everybody everybody in the country $1,000. Well, that's just stupid because there's a whole lot of people for whom it won't make any difference.
Right.
And then there's a lot of people that it will. So instead of giving people more money to people, more assistance to people that don't need it, you should give assistance to people that need it for. And the principle is that of equity and the principle of reparations that we've been talking about is that discrimination is generational, and the people that had to start out with less, it takes longer to build money. And say if your family has been rich for 3 generations, and you're at a job making the same salary as someone who was like the first person in their family to go to college, you can be making the same salary, but most of the time the person from the rich family is going to be going to be able to have a higher standard of living and less stress, because they're less likely to be in debt. They have inheritance and connections, and so that's kind of the principle of it. And so, and it's deep. You need to put some thought to it, and that's you need to. I don't know, man. Like, look at me or you.
That's me.
Okay. You need to look at structural change, and that was one of the things that Ralph Bunche did. I mean, he went in the 1930s. I talk a lot about this study that he was part of. The Carnegie Foundation did a 5-year study of race in America, and they had a Swedish guy come over to run the show because they didn't want to have a black person run the show. But Gunnar Myrdal was, and he was very accomplished, but he was smart. He gave people their assignments, and he was smart in that respect. And so what Ralph Bunche, he was investigating structure and investigating how the world being racist has an impact on people, no matter what, even if they're not, no matter what their direct personal experience is. And so that's how that research was used for Brown v. Board of Education, because there had been the Plessy-Ferguson decision in 1896 saying that separate but equal is equal, and so they built cases. They needed to make the case that is not true. So then, that if you deny people participation in the greater society, even if their school is as good, it is still damaging to them. It is damaging to them psychologically, and it is damaging to their future. And that was a real problem for people. Although in some respects, so many places took so fucking long to get desegregated, because there were a lot of black teachers lost their jobs after desegregation, because people were like, oh, okay, since we're gonna if people put schools, when people combined it, they're like, okay, well, we're just gonna fire the black teachers and keep the white teachers. So it's an example of how, okay, jumping over to The Handmaid's Tale, this evil, the person says, better never means better for everyone, and always means worse for some. So there's a flip side to a lot of things. Okay, so that was one thing that the Murdahl study was used for, and it was also used on the Kerner Commission in the late 60s, which was examining society, examining structures, examining families and communities to try and fix problems, not just looking at the individual, looking at how a structure could be keeping people down. So one of the things that happened in the late 60s that was controversial was, the late 60s, people were trying to set commissions and research the ghetto. I think that was one of the first times that the word reached the mainstream. So it was like, okay, well, let's go find out what's going on in this ghetto and see what we can do about it. And so there were social scientists that talked about family breakdown. And you can talk about that as a problem. You can look at people's, like, okay, single parent families are being affected in this way. Single parent families are having these difficulties. Okay, how can we look at this problem? Or you can just write it off in a really racist sort of way.
Right.
And saying that, like, okay, well, these people don't, make it look like, okay, well, people don't know what they're doing, or people don't care, or something like that. In a way, like, you can make, okay, here's a little rub. Okay, here's try this one on. It's one thing to. You can make generalizations about systems, okay? Like you can say something like, okay, if you only make unemployment last, okay, well, like a perfect sort of thing is, okay, if you don't give child care subsidies, then people won't go to work. Women might want to be on welfare instead of going to work because it costs more to pay for their kids' childhood. You can say that, or you can say that women don't care about working and that's why they're not working. And so there is a big difference there. So that is something that was getting batted around in the 60s. And some of it was bad, but I give credit to some of the figures that were involved that were at least facing an issue and engaging an issue and trying to use information for policy, trying to gather information in order to make changes, which was something Ralph Bunche was doing, but that's something that doesn't happen a lot of the time. So Bunche's research was used by that commission again to demonstrate the psychological damage of racism and segregation, that you need to you need to look at it as, well, again, this damages people no matter what their personal experience is. And this is a structure, this is a system that we need to change. We can keep trying to, we should keep trying to improve schools, but if people are being kept away from things, or look at the reasons that things are are how they are. Like, well, like now, I mean, you know, now there's like real problems with Latinx kids missing school. Well, it's because their parents are afraid they'll get picked up. So anyway, so our boy Joe, they were talking about equity, and he started talking about how there's parents that don't talk enough to their kids, and he was saying, well, you know, keep the record player on at night, and for the TV and record player on at night. People are like, what? The fucking record player? And so also, you know, we're talking about equity, and he went back to saying, well, there's parents that don't know what they're doing. Like, whoa, how can you fucking say that? That's just, you're saying that the problem is parents aren't doing a good job. You're saying the problem is that parents don't know what they're doing. And so that was just extremely fucked up. And he was just really disconnected, because I was like, wait, dude, he's really close with his grandchildren. Which one of the reasons he didn't run for president in 2016 was because his son had just died and he wanted to be available to his grandchildren. I mean, his grandchildren are so... It's not like he's not around young people. I mean, his grandchildren are going to be on their phones all the time, like record players do. So he's out of it. He gave a hard... This woman was asking him questions. He got an attitude with this woman asking him questions. Like, you know, asked him a question. He said, oh, you're a lovely person. It's like, what the fuck, dude? You're supposed to be answering questions. You're really disrespectful. So... Anyway, Bird Dog hasn't been in the... It doesn't seem like Bird Dog's been in the news that much lately. See, man, you had to burden...
You know, like they're focusing, they're trying to just slowly just weed him out.
Yeah,
you're liking that.
Now, I know, man. See, now he's going to know that, like, okay, homie, you lost, like, not once, but twice. Serves you right, Bird Dog.
I think that's it for him if he loses this time. That's going to be done, a wrap. It should be a wrap for him. You should just stop.
It should be, but, well, shit, man. I mean, I'm sure he looks at people like Robert Mugabe. He's like, well, Mugabe was in office till he was 90. Why can't I be?
I don't think there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, people are... Well, if you're not stealing elections like he was, you know, like, yeah, people... Oh, man, remember... I haven't checked on the old guy that was elected in Malaysia. Oh, I need
How old was he?
Old?
Like old, like 100?
No, like, I think he was in his 90s.
Wow.
So, okay, the world is fucked. Okay, so doctors are being kidnapped, and in Cameroon, a group of teachers in Cameroon is clubbing together to pay the ransom for their kidnapped colleagues. I mean, like, people are needing to ransom their colleagues on their own. They can't even get any help. Buba Samson was abducted in August by suspected English-speaking separatists who later contacted his wife to demand payment to free him. They're English-speaking separatists. Okay, now that is interesting. I wonder if there's English-speaking separatists. I do not know of English-speaking separatists elsewhere. And, okay, so Great Britain, it continues to be going to shit with Brexit. My dad is really fascinated by Brexit. He's following it closely. But it's weird to me, or interesting with the part. See, like, okay, imagine if we had a parliamentary system, and, you know, Trump has shut down the government, I guess, you know. So, okay, because what happens is, the Boris Johnson in the UK needs to try and form a coalition, and the state of Israel is having an election, or had an election, and despite being under investigation for corruption, Benjamin Netanyahu was reelected, but he needs to try and form a coalition, and he is doing it with, of course, my very favorite people, the ultra orthodox in Israel. So basically, it's kind of like the fundamentalists in the U.S. getting behind Trump. The ultra religious, I mean, Netanyahu's pretty crooked, but they are willing to grant Netanyahu immunity from prosecution, and yeah, they're saying that he is allowing the ultra-Orthodox to have more power, which is, like, fucked up. They control, like, whether businesses can be open on Saturdays.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. Like, fuck you people. So, anyway, my niece is still in Israel. And then my brother is, that's when he couldn't do the, he couldn't stick around for the civil rights trip because he's gonna go to Israel and Jordan to see my niece.
Nice.
They're gonna meet in Jordan. So, but yeah, my niece keeps posting pictures of herself in Israel with a bikini.
How much longer is she gonna be down there?
I think a year. She's gonna spend a year. Yeah, and not longer, Madeline. You should get your ass.
Never know,
home.
man. She might like it down there.
I don't want her to stay there, man.
She might be like, hey.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it now. So.
Well, she's blonde. They like blonde girls over there, so guys are gonna be.
So she's probably really liking it.
Well, yeah. So hopefully she's not like, I don't know. Of course you're gonna worry. Of course you're gonna worry about her. Okay, so so that is Cameroon. The other thing that, in Israel, the UN found that Israel and Palestine both committed war crimes in the 2014 conflict. And a kindergarten, remember how I was talking about black Jews last time? A kindergarten closed after a black child, a 6-year-old girl who's Ethiopian Israeli. She was born in Israel. Her mother took her to kindergarten, and they said, like, oh, she's not registered. She's in that kindergarten over there. And she walks into the room and sees, like, oh, all the kids in this kindergarten are black, and there's no black kids in the other class. So it's like it's fucking 2019, and the fucking state of Israel, which is, like, founded because of oppression, to say the least, and discrimination and all of that, is segregating kids. So they shut the kindergarten down, and, good job on the mother that spoke up about this. There's a picture of the little girl. So cute. So, okay. I am going to get my little adapter thing so we can take a break and I can find out about my buddy in Malaysia.
Alrighty. Let's do it. We will be back, everybody.
We'll be right back.